Hey Jordan, in today's video I will be going over the anatomy of the four rotator cuff muscles along with the associated bones and joints. To start, the rotator cuff is made up of four muscles that work together to pull the head of the humerus against the glenoid cavity. Just as a quick recap, the humerus is that long bone that makes the upper arm, and an important part of the bone to be mentioned are the tubercles. The greater one is more superior and lateral to the lesser tubercle or bump in the bone. Another important structure is the scapula. This is the big bony structure, and while it is only one structure for the sake of this video, I divided it into an anterior and posterior illustration. The scapula includes three fossas or depressions within the bone, as well as a lateral border. These serve as the medial attachment points for the rotator cuff muscles. These two structures are important to remember because where the humeral head meets the glenoid cavity is what creates this glenohumeral joint, which is a ball and socket joint that allows for mobility and stability. The first posterior muscle that I will be mentioning is called the supraspinatus. This holds your humerus in place and keeps your upper arm stable. The muscle attaches medially to the supraspinous fossa of the scapula and laterally to the greater tubercle of the humerus. The striations are pretty horizontal and run left to right, as seen on both shoulders. This muscle allows the movement of abduction, or lifting your arm away from your body. The second posterior muscle that I will be mentioning is the infraspinatus. Medially, it attaches to the infraspinous fossa of the scapula, and laterally, it attaches to the greater tubercle of the humerus. The striations of this muscle are diagonal, and they do create a somewhat triangular shape where medially it is more wide. The third muscle that I will be mentioning is the teres minor, and this is the smallest, most elongated muscle. Laterally, it attaches to the lateral border of the scapula and again to the greater tubercle of the humerus. The muscle striations, as I mentioned, are pretty parallel, thin, and elongated. Both the infraspinatus and the teres minor help the shoulder perform lateral rotation, or rotation away from the body. The only anterior muscle of the rotator cuff is the subscapularis. Medially, it attaches to the subscapular fossa, and laterally, it attaches to the lesser tubercle of the humerus. The striations are triangular in nature, and again, laterally, they are thinner, and medially, they widen. This muscle helps the body perform medial or internal rotation. Today we learned the four muscles of the rotator cuff, and SITS is a great acronym to help you remember them, as mentioned in the lab. These muscles help you perform lateral rotation, medial rotation, and abduction. Within the body, muscles help you perform a series of movements. There are actions such as forward rotation, backwards rotation, elevation, and depression. Additionally, there is abduction, adduction, medial rotation, lateral rotation, flexion, and extension. We can determine muscle movement by looking at the 2 points of attachment, such as the fixed point of attachment or the non-moving point, and the insertion, which is the moving point of attachment. By looking at this, in addition to the joints, the muscle crosses, we can determine the muscle movement. We ask ourselves, what action would the muscle do in a relaxed versus contracted state? And by looking at this anatomy, we can then determine the movement.